You know that person who sits through the most heartbreaking movie and just shrugs at the end? They'll say something like, "It's just a movie, relax." Meanwhile, you're sobbing into your popcorn. Here's the thing, they're not cold. They're not emotionless robots. They've just built a wall between themselves and fiction. And that wall, it didn't appear out of nowhere. It was constructed brick by brick for a reason. Let's talk about why. When you detach from movies, you're not just skipping the tears, you're protecting yourself from something deeper. Psychologists call this emotional regulation through distancing. It's basically your brain saying, "Nope, not today." Some people learned early on that feeling too much hurts, so they drew a line. Fiction stays fiction. Reality stays manageable. It's not about being tough. It's about survival. And honestly, that makes perfect sense once you understand where it comes from. Here's where it gets interesting. Kids who grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments often learn to control what they can. And guess what? You can't control real-life emotions easily, but you can control how much a movie affects you. So the brain adapts. It creates this mental switch. Fiction becomes just noise. The emotional impact gets filtered out before it even lands. It's genius, really. Your mind protecting you without asking permission first. Think about it like this. If crying during a sad scene feels unsafe, your brain learns to skip the whole process. It's not conscious. Nobody wakes up and decides to never cry at movies. It just happens over time. The more you practice emotional control in real life, the more it leaks into everything else. Movies, books, music, anything designed to make you feel becomes slightly muted. Like watching life through frosted glass. Now, some people think this is a problem, like you're missing out on the full human experience. But here's the truth, it's not always bad. Emotional distancing has benefits. You stay calm in chaos, you process things logically, you don't get swept up in drama. The issue only shows up when you can't turn it off. When every emotional moment, even the safe ones, gets blocked, that's when the wall becomes a cage instead of protection. Let's dig into the psychology. There's this concept called affect regulation. Basically, how you manage your emotional responses. People who dismiss movies as just movies often have incredibly tight affect regulation. They've mastered the art of not letting emotions spiral. But mastery comes at a cost. You lose spontaneity. You lose that raw, unfiltered joy or sadness. Everything becomes a little more measured, a little more controlled, a little more distant. Here's something wild. Studies show that people who detach from fictional emotions often had caregivers who dismissed their feelings as kids. Not always, but often. They heard things like, "Stop being dramatic," or "It's not a big deal," repeatedly. So they internalized it. They learned that emotions are inconvenient. That feeling too much makes you weak. And movies? Movies are designed to make you feel. So rejecting them becomes an unconscious act of self-preservation. But wait, there's more. Some people detach because they're actually highly sensitive. Sounds backwards, right? But think about it. If you feel everything intensely, fiction becomes overwhelming. A sad movie isn't just sad, it's devastating. So you build defenses. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. You create distance to avoid drowning. It's not coldness. It's survival mode for people who feel too much. Protecting the heart by pretending it's unbreakable. Now let's talk about the dark side. Emotional distancing doesn't stay in the theater, it spreads. You start applying the same logic to real relationships. They're just upset, they'll get over it. You minimize other people's pain because you've learned to minimize your own. Empathy gets harder, connection feels forced. You become the person who says, "Just move on," when someone's grieving. Not because you're cruel, but because that's your default setting. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you can't cry at a movie, you might struggle to cry for yourself too. The same wall that keeps fiction out, keeps your own emotions in. You become numb to your own pain. You rationalize it away. You tell yourself you're fine when you're not. And the scariest part? You might not even notice. Because numbness feels normal when you've lived with it long enough, it becomes home. But here's where it gets hopeful. Recognizing this pattern is the first step. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start noticing when you're dismissing emotions, when you're building walls, when you're choosing safety over feeling. And slowly, you can practice letting fiction affect you again. Start small. Watch something light. Let yourself feel a little. You don't have to sob uncontrollably. Just crack the door open slightly. The funny thing is, people who say movies are just movies often care the most. They're just scared to admit it, because admitting you care means admitting you're vulnerable. And vulnerability feels dangerous when you've been hurt before. So they hide behind logic, behind dismissal, behind that casual shrug. But underneath, there's someone who desperately wants to feel without fear. Someone who's just really good at pretending they don't. Let's talk about the social aspect. In some cultures, emotional restraint is praised. Being stoic is strength. Crying is weakness. So people learn to perform emotional control publicly. And movies are public, even when you're alone. Because you know you'll talk about them later. You'll be judged for your reaction. So you preemptively shut down. You protect your reputation before protecting your feelings. Social survival beats emotional honesty. Here's a weird question. What if detachment is actually a superpower? Hear me out. In a world designed to manipulate your emotions constantly, being immune to fictional manipulation is valuable. Advertisers, politicians, content creators all want your feelings. They want you reactive, controllable. Maybe people who stay detached are just protecting their emotional autonomy. They're refusing to be puppets. That's not coldness. That's resistance. That's power reclaimed. But there's a balance, right? You can protect yourself without completely shutting down. You can choose when to engage emotionally and when to step back. The goal isn't to cry at everything. It's to have the option. To feel when it's safe. To detach when it's necessary. Flexibility beats rigidity. The people who struggle most aren't the ones who never cry. They're the ones who never get to choose whether they do or don't. Let's get personal for a second. If you're someone who dismisses movies emotionally, ask yourself this. When was the last time you let yourself feel something fully? Not just movies. Anything. Joy, sadness, anger, love. If you can't remember, that's your answer. The wall isn't just around fiction. It's around you. And walls are great for castles, but terrible for hearts. Hearts need doors. Hearts need windows. Hearts need breathing room. Here's what nobody tells you. Feeling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And being human is the whole point. Movies are just mirrors. They reflect parts of us we forgot existed. When you dismiss them, you're not just rejecting fiction. You're rejecting the part of you that needs to process emotion safely. Because sometimes, crying at a movie is easier than crying about your actual life. It's practice. So what's the solution? Simple. Start giving yourself permission. Permission to feel without judgment. Permission to be moved by fiction. Permission to be vulnerable. Even if it's just you and a screen. You don't owe anyone your tears, but you owe yourself the freedom to cry if you need to. Emotional walls are exhausting to maintain. And honestly, sometimes letting them crumble is the bravest thing you can do. Here's the beautiful irony. The people who say movies are just movies often become the most emotional when they finally let themselves feel. Because they've been holding back for so long, it's like a dam breaking. All those suppressed feelings come flooding out. And it's messy. It's overwhelming. But it's also incredibly healing. Because feeling something, anything, reminds you that you're alive. That you're not just surviving, you're living. So next time someone says, it's just a movie, remember this. They're not wrong. It is just a movie. But it's also permission to feel, permission to process, permission to be human without consequences. And maybe, just maybe, they need that permission more than anyone. Because behind every "it's just a movie" is someone protecting their heart. And hearts, no matter how guarded, still need stories. They still need to feel.